Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm very pleased to introduce this specially selected panel today for this special Sikh Channel EU referendum programme. Joining us today on the panel we have Lord Rose from the Remain campaign, Baroness Burt from the Liberal Democrats, and also Tanmanjeet Singh Dhesi from Gravesham, former mayor and parliamentary candidate. We're also joined by members of the Sikh community from the Cross, London, who will be posing some questions to the panel. So, without further ado, can we commence with Rose Codling, the headmistress of Khalsa School. Rose, have you got a question for Lord Rose, please?
Yes.
We've got two Roses there. That's great.
Rose.
In education, we have for many years been teaching and preparing our children to be global citizens. With Europe being our nearest neighbours, what message are we presenting to children and our young people should we elect to effectively just pull up the drawbridge?
Well, with respect, we'd be sending the wrong message, and I think that is the right answer. You're asking the right person the question because I am effectively an immigrant to this country. My father came here as a stateless person just before the Second World War. My mother came here from Egypt. Had it not been for the fact that this country for many centuries and many decades has taken in people, I wouldn't be here today, number one. Number two, I have children, and I brought my children up to be British, but I brought them up to be British Europeans. And both of them are in their early 30s, and they're horrified about the prospect that they and their children, because they both now got children themselves, my grandchildren, are facing the very real prospect that in 10 days' time, 9 days' time, this country might opt to turn its back on one of the great civilizations of the world, one of the great commercial enterprises of the world, 500 million people who are 20 miles across the English Channel. So I totally agree with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We've also got pupils from the school. Is there anything the pupils would like to add? Manveer, Dinsa and Taylor Bazran.
As a student who will be preparing to go to university soon, what impact would us leaving the EU have on universities and further education opportunities for young people like myself? I'm thinking particularly about the ability to access universities courses in European universities in a cost-effective manner, and also the transfer of university teachers between Europe and UK.
Thank you. Perhaps Baroness Burt, could you deal with that, please?
Yes, that's a really excellent question, and it brings a very important issue about who is this referendum for. And although there are young people who may not even have the vote yet, it's for your future that people who are very concerned about us coming out of the European Union are thinking, really. And very often, you can say to a grandma or a granddad, they might say, oh yeah, no, we want to come out, and then say, yeah, but what about your children? And what about your children's children? In terms of your future prospects in the European Union, at the moment we enjoy free movement in the EU. And university students also get lots and lots of fantastic programmes, like the Erasmus programme. About 200,000 students have been through that programme, where you get to go abroad, experience what's happening in other European countries, and then they come over here and to other. And so we all become part of a European community in the truest sense of the word. We learn to understand where other people are coming from. That enables us then to be able to work together more effectively, and also to be a little bit more tolerant when people don't have exactly the same views as we do.
Thank you very much, Baroness Burt. That's all very well, but as we know, the immigration issue is of great concern to the British public. Perhaps the Gurpreet Singh Anand can tell us about some of the concerns being expressed across the country with immigration and how the ways of immigration are changing society.
Do you feel that open borders is sustainable with the level of immigration that the UK is facing? It's putting a massive strain on our schools, which can't plan for the figures of pupils coming who are going to need extra English lessons. It's putting a strain on housing. In my local area, houses which were once housing just one family now house 3 to 4 families of migrants, and it's putting a massive strain on the local area, changing the fabric of the local society. And do you feel that is sustainable?
Tanmanjeet, what do you think? Is that sustainable, this level of immigration?
In terms of immigration, it's an excellent question, Gurpreet. I think we've got to bear in mind that when we're talking about immigration, we need to do so in a very balanced manner, because there has been a lot of immigration which has been very, very good for Britain. The likes of myself, as Lord Rose said as well, I'm the son of immigrants, and immigrants throughout the decades, if not the centuries, have contributed a great deal to Britain. I would agree with yourself that we do not want an open door immigration policy, and that we need to have immigration, but in a controlled manner. Immigration which benefits Britain. But if we are conversing with regards to the EU, if more than 2 million individuals from the EU are living and working in Britain, conversely, more than 2 million Brits are living and working across the EU as well. So it is a two-way process. And if we look at our NHS, if you talk to most of the people employed within the NHS, why they say that immigration is important, it's important for our public services, because without immigration we will not be able to sustain an excellent, efficient working, whether it's NHS, whether it's in the construction industry. I'm involved in the construction industry, that's my day job. And most of the firms, when they have a survey from a building magazine, the most reputable construction magazine, what they found was that 65% of firms said that, look, we are in favour of remaining in the EU.
Sorry if I can stop you there. Yeah. Should we be training more of our own youngsters to work in construction rather than having to rely upon people from other parts of Europe?
Yeah.
Perhaps I can bring in Sandeep Maker at this point. Sandeep is a local property entrepreneur who's got a very large, extensive property portfolio and works in the construction industry. What do you say about that, Sandeep? Should we be growing our own talent for the construction industry? Do we need to keep importing labour from Europe?
I think we do need to import labour, really. I mean, this as they said in the panel there, that really, this country, the immigrants do give a lot to this country, yeah. So obviously voting for staying in the EU will help with immigration, yeah.
And so where does your vote go? Are you going to vote to stay or to leave?
Stay. Just obviously looking at the economy as well, we haven't quite come out of recession yet as well, since the 2008 recession still has, huge impact on us, and I just think, it's better to keep the status quo, just really.
Just safer, is it?
Yeah, safer.
So, Lord Rose, is it a question of safety? People feel safer to stay in Europe? Is it uncertainty?
Well, I'd like to go back to the previous question. It's a very, very important question. I know that it does trouble a lot of people, the amount of coming into this country. And I totally take your point about pressure that it's putting on educational services and on social services and on housing and social housing and whatever else. But, and we are to an extent the victims of our own success. We are a successful economy, we have full employment. Actually, we could not now do some of the things we do in this country if we didn't have the 2 million odd people living in Europe doing the jobs that they do and paying their £20 billion a year in taxation. But there are three parts to the immigration issue. One is, if you are going to be a member of the EU club, one of the conditions is we have free movement. So as you pointed out, 2 million Britons live in Spain and in Portugal and whatever else, and they've got the right to live there. They get free health and they get the ability to work and set up businesses and all the social benefits that those people who live in the UK get. The second point is that there are a larger number of people coming to this country from outside the EU, and many of them are, of course, very welcome. Has it put some pressure on? Yes. And then there's the third issue, which is an existential issue of our time, which is the very terrible issue of migration at the moment, which is not confined to Europe, but it's also an issue we're seeing in Southeast Asia with people trying to move to richer and more successful countries like Australia. Issues we're seeing now in Mexico, where people are trying to move across the Mexican border into the States. And the issue we've now got in Europe, where very many people want to have better lives for their children. They want safety, they want security, they want education, they want clean water, they want good food, and it's hardly surprising. So we've got a duty of care to some of these people. Now that's a big problem that government's got to try and solve, but I believe firmly that these problems are best solved by a group working together, i.e. the EU, than us trying to do our own thing.
Any more views on immigration from the audience, please?
Burt, I think.
Sorry, to take some views on immigration from the audience, particularly on the issue of Turkey and potential Turkish immigration. That's been a very hot topic in the news recently, opening the borders to Turkey. Jasmine, would you like to add to that?
Well, I don't have a question in respect to Turkey. My question would be more about the impact on families that live across borders. And I'll give you some examples. There are many Brits who have relatives living in Spain. There are homes which are owned by Brits in Spain. There are also, conversely, families that are living in the UK who have their roots elsewhere in Europe. If we were to leave Europe, we could potentially see those families being split. We could see visa restrictions coming in. We could see greater difficulties in maintaining those family units, which are, in the modern world, we're used to the whole global family idea, the idea that our parents may not necessarily live in the same country as we do, our grandchildren may not necessarily live in the same country either. In those circumstances, how great a risk do you think leaving the EU is for Britain for family values?
That's great. Any more on the immigration issue at all? Would you like to add something?
Mine's about education.
Roughly 13% of tax goes towards education. Will this percentage rise if we leave the EU?
Laura, would you like to deal with that one, please?
Yeah, I'd love to deal with that one. Could I just say as well on the immigration one, employment in the UK is higher than ever before. So going back to the construction industry, we have a big skill shortage in construction in this country. So going back to what Davinder said, you wouldn't have enough youngsters to actually fill the gap of the number of people that we need. And as more people come in, guess what? The economy grows with them. You know, so people are really scared that their jobs are being taken, but we've got full employment in this country. So going on to your question about education, and education is within the control of this country. We decide how much money is being spent on schools. What the problem is, potentially, is that if there's less money, because we're not growing so fast, because we don't have access to the biggest market in the world, so we can't sell our products, so other companies from outside the EU don't come here and invest so that they can get access into the European Union and sell their goods tariff-free. What will that do to our economy? And there is a consensus amongst economists that the amount of gross domestic product, all the money that we make together as a country, will go down. So that will affect how much we decide we want to spend on education.
Thank you very much.
But it's the most important thing anyway, in my view, education.
Tanmanjeet, there's a lot of scaremongering. We've heard a lot in the news that if the UK were to leave, the world would come to an end. The European Council President, Donald Tusk, said Brexit could lead to the end of Western political civilization in its entirety, which is quite an incredible quote. What do you think about that? Will the world come to an end if we leave?
Definitely not. Well, I hope not. But I think in terms of scaremongering, that has been ratcheted up by certain individuals on both sides. And I think that's probably based on the premise that there are certain individuals who would respond more if they, or vote in a particular way, if they're afraid of a particular outcome. And unfortunately, whether that's the spin doctors or whoever is advising certain individuals within the respective Leave and Remain campaigns, that we need to scare individuals or show them, it's going to be either financial Armageddon, if we leave, or vice versa. If we remain, it's, the country's going to go to pot. And I think we must always have a very reasoned debate. We don't want to fall into that. I think whichever way we vote, it's fair to say that we as a nation will continue, but it's the extent to which we will prosper. Whether we're better off remaining in, or indeed voting to leave, the EU. I think we've got to take it, in context. I'm personally, for having a very reasoned debate, but without the scaremongering, because all that does is it puts off a great deal of our electorate, because then they just think, oh my God, it's politicians, lying through their teeth, and they probably won't end up voting, or they'll just end up.
Thank you very much. Lord Rose, have you been scaremongering at all in the Remain campaign?
Well, I am the chairman of the Remain campaign. We did say, and I echo your words, that when we started this campaign, we wanted to have an honest, open debate with clarity so people could be better informed. Because the most important thing we have to remember next week is that people have to go out and vote. This is a binary referendum. This is yes or no. There is no going back. You can't decide 5 years later that you don't like the look of this government and you want to have a different one. You'll be living with this just in the same way as I lived when I voted to join the European market in 1975. It's for 40 or 50 years. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in the passion of any argument, people tend to exaggerate. I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think that we have been very careful to make sure that what we do has been verified. Clearly, when you talk about some of the numbers, they are estimates. So, we have had the Treasury, we've had PwC, we've had the LSE, we've had the World Bank, we've had the CBI, we've had the OECD. All I say to you is that nobody can put an exact number on what the cost would be if we came out. But it is quite strange, isn't it, that all of them think we'll be worse off. So if the number is £2,000 a year per family or per person, or £6,000 per person, they're all generally agreed. And that's what we need to take notice of. And there are people around in this campaign who have the luxury of having an intellectual debate with themselves and with us about the consequence. This is a very big, the biggest social and economic experiment ever conducted by any country. We've got to make sure we get it right. Now, the people who will suffer in that are not the intellectuals, and not the rich, but they'll be the people in the workforce, the 2 or 3 million people whose jobs depend on us getting and keeping our economy going, as was said earlier, who will suffer. So we better be sure that we do get that decision right, because that's the biggest responsibility we've all got.
Thank you. And how far is age an issue in this? Do you think that the younger voters are more inclined to stay, whereas older people do want to come out? Perhaps, Raj, you can comment upon that from your personal experiences as to where perhaps you and different generations stand on the issue of Brexit.
Well, I was speaking to my parents earlier this morning, actually, and both my parents seem to be keen to vote to leave, in fact. So there certainly is a generational divide. One question I would put to Lord Rose is, as much as there's an intellectual discussion in regards to staying in and out, what would you say to those people who equate to this year's referendum to 1992 and those people who classified Black Wednesday as White Wednesday, and the idea that us leaving the European Union could potentially, in the long term, benefit the UK economy?
Well, I fundamentally don't believe the economy will benefit. I mean, I clearly am biased in favour of remaining. I'm the chairman of the Remain campaign. The economic statistics and the economic arguments seem to be overwhelmingly pointing in favour of staying in. As I said just now, I worry deeply about the consequences if we get it wrong. Nobody has ever left the EU. It's a big social and economic experiment. And at the end of the day, this is like joining a club, whether it's a golf club or whether it's a dining club or whether it's any sort of club, a squash club. We may not like all the members. We may not like all the rules. We may not like the cost of teeing off or the cost of playing for the squash court. But we joined the club, and we've got more chance, if we're in the club, of possibly being elected to a committee or influencing the rules of the club than if we're outside the club and suddenly we decide we want to be in, and we've got our noses pressed against the glass and we say, please can we come back in. be sure that as the first country to leave the EU after 40 or 50 years, if we then decide a few years later we'd like to come back in, I'm not sure we're going to get such an open welcome. So that's a very big consequence of getting it wrong.
Any further questions from anybody? Would you like to ask a question? Gurpreet Singh.
I have a question for the panel. One of the things which I think we need to look at is, particularly as Sikhs, we are a litmus test for freedom. In any country where we prosper, that country is free. And, you know, the UK is a prime example of that. We've prospered here. The laws serve us well and protect our identity. However, that's not the case across the EU. Particularly in France, where Sikh children are told they cannot wear the turban in school, where you're told to take off the turban for your driving license photo or your passport photo, and efforts by Sikhs in Europe to take these cases to court have just landed flat on their face, with the ECHR finding against the Sikhs by dismissing cases on ID photographs, and more recently the EU Advocate General looking to support workplace bans on religious garments like headscarves, turbans, crucifix. And how can the Leave campaign reassure Sikhs who are so visible with our beards, with our turbans, that we are not going to get stamped down by an EU secularism?
Tanmanjeet Singh, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, Gurpreet, that's an excellent point, and you know, that's something that I actually wanted to touch upon as well. We are better off remaining within the EU for that very reason, because if we want to help our Sikh brothers and sisters, whether that's in France, Belgium, in terms of, as you rightly pointed out, children can't actually wear the patka or turbans in school. When they want to get their photographs taken for ID purposes, they cannot do so wearing a turban, which is it's ridiculous. You know, to us it sounds ridiculous, but if we are to help them in the long run, we are not going to do so by exiting the EU, because within the EU, the country with the largest proportion of Sikhs and where the Sikh lobbying is the greatest is actually the UK. And when we have tried to change certain laws within the EU, it's been UK Sikhs that have been at the forefront of that, working with the different political parties and with our MEPs to try and effect change. So if we are going to leave, we will have zero influence
Would you like to come
on the
back on
decisions
that?
they take.
Do you agree?
To date, have we affected any change? France is still as it is. As I said, very recently, just a couple of weeks ago, the EU Advocate General came out with her view, although it's not law, it is her view, and it's a very serious view, that religious garb can be banned in the workplace as long as that policy is implemented neutrally. So I fear that we are not making impact in the EU. It took us until 2013 to even allow Sikhs to enter the EU Parliament wearing the kirpan.
Thank you, Gurpreet. Lord Rose, what reassurance can you offer, Gurpreet, on this point?
Well, I think I'd rather go back to the point I made earlier. I mean,
On this particular issue?
No, but there are no quick
identity.
There are no quick fixes, but I work on the basis that, you know, working from the inside and influencing is better than knocking on the door and having no influence. So that's my point. I think we should stay in, and there are some inequalities. There are things that have taken too long. There are things that will affect other communities that are not right. But if you're inside and you can start making a noise, you've got more chance of affecting a change.
Yeah, Mr. Burt, I mean, the answer to Gurpreet actually lies in the question that you just asked. Before 2002, we couldn't actually enter the Parliament wearing the kirpan. The fully baptised Sikhs could not do so. But because of our influence and, you know, trying to lobby, we managed to effect change. Likewise, if we look at certain European Union airports, we managed to effect change there by lobbying to say, well, look, you know, just as in the UK, how we do not disrespect somebody wearing a turban by the security personnel, you know, mishandling the turban. They've actually started to use the wand. So it's a gradual process. I think with regards to France, unfortunately, their interpretation of secularism is at the root cause of the issue here. But it's a gradual process.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sandeep, would you like to comment?
I just wanted to make the point that Scotland had a referendum recently, and we all felt it would be good for England and for Scotland if they stayed together. And that's what I'm saying, people who are voting for leaving, if it was good, if we felt Scotland staying with England was a good, right decision of Scotland, how would it make sense for us to leave Europe?
Thank you very much. Lauren, would you like to comment?
Yeah, you make the case perfectly. There's not very much more for me to say, really. I mean, Sir Stuart says, we're like a golf club. I think we're more like a family.
Yeah.
And you don't always get on with all of your family, but that bond that you have together, you can fall out, but the bond is there. And to actually, divorce, as I know to my cost, is very painful, very messy, and only the lawyers win. And that is what would happen, I think, if we left the EU.
Thank you very much. Sorry, we've got a question at the back, right at the back.
Hi there, it's Rowena Mason from The Guardian. Thanks for inviting me to your lovely event. I wanted to ask Lord Rose, pick up something he was saying about it's the workers that would suffer if we left the EU. We have seen the Leave campaign pick up on some comments that you made in the Select Committee about workers' wages going up if we leave the EU. What would you say to those people that are being told this by the Leave campaigners? Is it short-termist of them to think that their wages might go up if we leave?
Well, what I actually said was, I would say this, wouldn't I, that I was misquoted in the Select Committee because I was asked a straight economic question to which your newspaper, I think, actually gave me the credit of giving an honest answer to, which is if labour goes down in availability, what happens to the cost of labour? And the answer is simple economics, the cost of labour goes up. But that is not anything to do with the actual argument about whether we should or should not be in the bigger community, because I think the point was made earlier by Baroness Burt. What we really have to be sure about is that we can continue to grow our economy. And if we have a continually growing economy, which I believe we have more chance of doing in a 500 million person community, the largest economic bloc in the world, that will guarantee more jobs for everybody. But I did answer that question. I did answer it. You've accurately quoted me, but it was a straight answer to a straight economic question. And I think I expected more from the Select Committee than just cheap point scoring.
Are you happy with that answer?
I wondered if you do think that if that will be a consequence of leaving the EU, that the price of labour could go up.
No, I think what will happen, truthfully, what I actually think will happen if we come out of the EU, I think we will go into recession. How deeply and for how long, I cannot tell you, but we will go into recession. Even the Leave campaigners have told you there will be a period of uncertainty and decline. That will mean jobs will be lost because 3 million jobs are directly associated with being in Europe. And if 3 million jobs come onto the market, the price of labour will go down, not up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
So I'm a very firm Remainer. And for me, the answer is very clear. Absolutely. However, there are a significant proportion of individuals who are currently undecided. They are the ones who are effectively going to decide this referendum. So far, Project Fear on both sides hasn't worked. So far, the economic argument on both sides hasn't resonated. What do you think would be the arguments that would best resonate at this stage, considering we're so close to the date of the referendum, to get the swing voters to remain in?
Sorry, what do you think is the primary issue amongst the public? What do you feel is the issue?
I've been door-knocking, campaigning on the referendum, and for me, it's, from what I've seen, it's a combination of immigration, resources being stretched by local authorities, for which the answer is simple: get more funding from central government and get central government to remove the austerity cuts. But also, it's a question of sovereignty. And there are many people who are saying, well, I don't know the answers, I don't really understand the arguments on TV, I don't really understand what's being said in the papers, but for me, I just feel we need to be British, and the only way we can be really British is if we come out. So those are the arguments that I'm seeing on the doorstep. How do we challenge that, and how do we get the swing voters to vote to remain?
Thank you very much. Lauren, immigration, that seems to be the hot topic.
It is a very hot topic, and we ignore that topic absolutely at our peril. What I'm what I am very, very concerned about is you say, you know, what's going to change it round? You know, using the fear argument all the time is turning people off left, right, and centre. And what I would like to ask people is turn it round and do a much more positive question. What kind of a country do you want to live in? Do you want
with controlled borders and controlled immigration?
Controlled borders,
Do we
right?
want to open up to Turkey?
Well, there's no suggestion that we are going to be opening up to Turkey at the moment. We do have illegal immigration in this country, but that's within our own power. You know, we're the ones who are counting people into the country and not counting them out again. So we don't know how many migrants we've actually got here, but that doesn't even start to tackle it when it comes to illegal immigration. And I think that's something that you know, we could be a great deal stronger on. But I'd much rather look at the positive argument. Do we want to be international? Do we want to be open? Do we want to enjoy the benefits of being part of the largest market in the world? Or do we want to pull up the drawbridge, as our first questioner said, you know, turn our backs on the world and be an isolated little country in the middle of the North Sea? Because I know which one I would want, that's for sure.
Can I endorse that, if I may?
Yes.
And I
Sorry,
could not agree more. You asked the question about what are people getting the right information. I think the first thing we must do is respect the intelligence and the intellect of the great British public. I think
let me just clarify. I was talking specifically about the swing voters who haven't made their decision.
No, I understand, but the point I was going to make was I think that they will think very carefully. There's quite a number of people who today, the polls tell us, have not yet made up their minds, but I think they will make up their minds, and I think it's our responsibility, as I said earlier, to get them all out. The higher the percentage out in the electorate, the better the result is going to be in terms of Remain. And the point I want to then make is, yes, it's exactly as has been said. What sort of country do you want to live in? Well, I want to live in a dynamic country. I want to live in a country that has influence in the world. I want to live in a country that is an inclusive country, and this demonstration this evening is an inclusive country.
Sorry, Lord Rose, can I interrupt you there? Would you have to live in a country with 250,000 new people coming in each year?
Well, we've talked about that. But
is that sustainable?
No, this is what the government needs to do, to say, well, how do we accommodate this without putting too much strain on the social services, on education, on hospitals, what else? But they have been a benefit to the country, and we've got to find a way of dealing with it. And this country, in my view, is hugely benefited from inward migration from wherever people come, whether it's the Asians who came here from Uganda in the 1970s, whether it's the people who are now coming who will make a contribution in the future, whether it's the Huguenots who came here 300 or 400 years ago.
Is it a limit to that?
Well, there's always a limit,
limitless?
but you know what? Man and women are quite ingenious. We'll find ways, and if we want to make it work. 170 languages spoken in this country, many of them in London. Racial tolerance hugely high. Fantastic, you know, fantastic social migrations going on there. We are very, very lucky. We manage it very well.
Anybody in the audience with concerns about immigration who wants to come in on that, on the immigration issue specifically?
Hello. I work in healthcare, so covers, I guess, immigration and resources. And my question is actually, if we were to leave the EU, are we able to cherry pick better people to come in? Because at the moment, those very highly qualified people are having to jump through a lot of hoops to get to the position that the people within the EU just walk into. So is there a way, by leaving, we could actually get better immigration?
Tanmanjeet Singh, so immigration from the Commonwealth has been severely restricted.
Yeah,
what do you think?
First of all, that's one myth that I would like to dispel. Most of the individuals that are campaigning for us to leave the EU, the last thing on their mind is to have more immigration, especially from the Commonwealth countries. Most of them, including whether it's UKIP or many of the very Eurosceptic MPs, you know, from the different parties, predominantly I think from the Conservative Party. But if you know, we are to believe what they have said in the previous years, they will not be advocating greater immigration because they will constantly be looking at targets and how to restrict it.
What we're
of
talking
your
about is a
question-
fairer system,
Yeah,
a fairer
system,
system
that I agree
based
with.
internationally rather than on the European
That's it.
membership.
And in terms of your point about cherry picking certain individuals, I think there is already a system in place
There
that
is.
if we need certain qualified individuals, then they're actually fast tracked in. If there are, if they have a certain expertise, then that system already exists.
Is that your experience? Are you happy with that answer?
Well, I'm a dentist, and I know certain colleagues of mine have had to do exam after exam after exam to get a very basic job. And these are hugely qualified people in their own countries. They're specialists, and we're turning our back on them, or making them, as I say, jump through a lot of hoops that I think is probably slightly beneath them. And then people and other qualified, but certainly less qualified from the EU, come in and get those jobs a lot more easier. And I mean, I'm certainly in, but that is an issue that I think certain of my colleagues
Any more
have.
concerns about immigration from India, particularly amongst the audience? Any personal experiences where people have had difficulty with visa?
I wasn't going to comment on India, but just to kind of return the point there around the discussion about controls from whether in or out. And I mean, the points have been put forward to display better controls on either side. One is if we leave, we would embed the Australian point system in terms of having skill-based immigration. But then the other side is around if we go through with remaining, then we would have deals and terms agreed after we remain that we would be able to negotiate on, I guess, a better form of immigration. I don't know if you'd be able to comment on what that deal would and those terms would involve, which would allow, I guess, a bit more structured, controlled flow of immigration from within the EU.
Rhonda, would you like to comment upon that?
Yes, you raised the Australian point system, and this seems to be quite a panacea for a lot of the outers. We'll have the Australian point system, and that will work fine. I'm sure Sir Stuart might want to comment on this. I'm not a technical expert. I'm told that a lot more people are allowed into Australia because of the point system than are into the United Kingdom, and that it won't work. I don't know why it won't work, but I hope Sir Stuart might be able to explain that.
I'll answer the question the other way around slightly. Thank you for thinking I could answer. I'm not sure I can. but we have to accept one thing, and I think there's no point beating around the bush. If we want to stay in Europe, we have to accept the free movement of those people in the European community, and that means anybody in the 27 other countries can come here. But equally, as we've pointed out, many of Brits live abroad. You can go and work abroad tomorrow morning. You can set up shop in Portugal, Spain, Yugoslavia, Romania. I don't think you can go to Albania. Michael Gove thought that was a good idea, but I don't think that's a member of the EU yet. But the short answer is that's how it goes. So that is not negotiable. Do we need to have a better system for, if you like, positively discriminating to make sure that we fill the jobs that are needed in our country to make sure that our services are better provided? More of us, I think we do, and that system that's being proposed, but like the Australian system, is certainly merits examination. But I think, you raised another point. Very good point. Many people are still coming in here illegally. The government has not been, it recognises that it's got a problem and needs to sort that out, and we could do a lot more self-help, which is completely outside the argument about being in Europe. It's a little bit of a red herring.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So one point to kind of go back on just that. So on the free movement, we have to remain in the free movement, regardless of it. It's just a nonsense point about saying if we leave, we'll remain in the single market without abiding by the terms.
That's what the EU has said.
No, exactly. So do you agree then that we are better off remaining in because we are able to actually influence and be part of that discussion?
Absolutely.
And that's the main point, isn't it?
Thank you very much.
Passionately.
Thank you.
Hi there. So I think we can agree there's a lot of we talked about scaremongering on both sides, in and out. And as we've talked about, there's a large proportion of individuals in the UK that are undecided, and a lot of research and a lot of the polls are showing that the younger generation in this country are either sort of voting in or are undecided, given the way the society where they've been raised, with the rise of multinational corporations and their sort of connection with the internet and being connected with society. However, there's a real disengagement with politics at the moment. And we can see a lot of that coming through, especially with immigration, sometimes a bit of scaremongering, sometimes bringing in topics, for example, like legal immigration that may not necessarily be directly connected with the EU referendum.
So do you think young voters will turn out or not?
So my question is actually to yourselves in terms of what do you think needs to be done in terms of the messaging to really get these young voters to turn out, to really get the people who are undecided to get that message across to them.
Tanmanjeet, would you very briefly like to comment?
Yeah, I think in terms of voter engagement, that is crucial because given, if we are to believe in polls, and I think they have been drastically wrong, just last year is a prime example in the general election. But I think the victory will go to which side can actually get their vote out.
Specifically with young people, young voters.
So if the Remain campaign are to win, and if we are to believe that the majority of youngsters or youth, or whether it's people in their 20s and 30s, if the majority of them are going to be voting for Remain, it's no good if they're either sitting at home or, in worst case scenario, I think so many of them aren't even registered because of the individual electoral registration process which was initiated last year. Many of them aren't actually registered. So I think it's important that we do that to mobilise the respective voters, and I'm sure a great deal of that will be done in the last week.
So how to get the young people out, Lord Rose? How will we get all the youngsters out to vote?
A lot of work has
come out or not?
A lot of work has gone on. More younger people have registered in the last few weeks than had registered in the previous few months. They are engaged generally. They are more pro generally. We saw what happened last week when there's a rush, but effectively now, you cannot register now, so those people who are on the books are on the books. Let's hope enough have come out. But the really important thing, as I said before, let's encourage people to get out to vote. We want a nice sunny day. We want everybody out there and saying, come on, knocking on people's door, why haven't you been out to vote? Because the higher the turnout, the better the chances that we will get the right result.
Thank you. Lovely. The young voters, will they come out or not? What do you think?
I hope they will. I hope that our message will be relentlessly positive to paint the picture, the kind of world these young people want. They're not afraid of being part of an international organisation. They're not afraid of being part of the global community. They're outward, they're positive, they're optimistic. Let's pull on that, let's draw on the kind of positive message that will excite them and make it worth their while to think, yes, okay, this is what I want, but oh dear, that's what I would lose if I don't turn out and vote.
Thank you very much. We started today with Rose. Rose, perhaps you could add your final comments, having heard from the panel. What are your final views? Are you swayed?
I feel very strongly that, in fact, we've got a vast resource out there in Europe for our young people to be able to have access to. And as we said before, we are growing global citizens. We're growing young people to be able to look outwards and not always inwards. And in order for us to have a society where we can understand each other, where we can understand what is going on, because there's a lot of things about terrorism and what's going on and a lot of scare from there. But unless we can actually understand each other and educate our young people to that, then I think then we would be inward rather than outward. And us remaining in Europe will be able to help us to tap into that sort of resource. So yes, I think that, I would say personally, we need to stay in Europe.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant answer. Brilliant answer. Well done.
Thank you. Final comments, very briefly from the panel. Tanmanjeet, final comments.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think there's a variety of reasons why we should vote to remain in the EU. Whether it's in terms of our national security, if we look at the institution of the EU, how in effect it has stopped a continent from which was continually at war, by the way.
Yeah.
It's kept the peace so that we are now on discussing things about trade rather than what the next geopolitical configuration is going to be and who's going to be fighting whom. In terms of our economy, if we look at economic growth,
very briefly, please,
and in terms of our internationalist perspective, to ensure that we are at the top table that we have our say and that we do not become an inward-looking country.
Thank you very much. Lord Rose, briefly summing up.
Very rarely that I would encourage people to be selfish, but be selfish. Think of yourselves, think of your children, think of your grandchildren, think of your families, and think of your futures, and vote the right way.
Thank you. And Baroness Burt.
Yes. Well, I think Tanmanjeet's definitely summed it up when you said, you can't protect against distant threats by standing alone. We are much stronger together, and we can't change what's going on in the European Union, as Sir Stuart says, by standing on the sidelines and carping. And I would just finish off by saying, I think that Britain, I'm a proud Briton and a proud European, and I think that Britain stands tall when it stands tall in its own backyard in Europe.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to thank Baroness Burt, Tanmanjeet, Dhesi and Lord Rose for coming along today. Most of all, I'd like to thank the audience who've come from far afield, from across the southeast, who attended today from Croydon, Sandip Maker, from the Casa Primary School and Secondary School in Slough. Thank you very much, and members of the audience. So thank you very much for attending, and we hope that you will all turn out and express your views on the 23rd of June. 23rd of June.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.